Hey everyone, and welcome to another live session of the Type Convo Podcast. Today I feel really privileged and really happy and really excited to be talking to one of the people that actually left a huge mark on typography and design. He's been in this business for over 20 years, and he worked for companies like Adobe and did some really transformative work. And I'm really happy to invite Elliot Jay Stocks to my interview today, and we'll try to talk about different things. He's not just a type artist, he's a typographer, creative director. He's currently a consultant in Adobe fonts. He's been working with Adobe before. He also published a couple of magazines, and today we will also be talking about his new book, Universal Principles of Typography. I have my copy here, and if you give us some good questions, you can actually leave today's live podcast with your own copy. We will be giving it away later after the podcast ends. So let me try and invite Elliot. Okay, finally.
There we go.
I don't know why Instagram doesn't really like me, man. Like every time I try to do this, it's always some problem. I've been clicking on that invite button, but
I believe
it doesn't
you.
work.
Yeah. You must have said something against Zuck at some point. Maybe
no, I did it against Adam Mosseri, so I probably messed up there. Yeah. Well,
how you doing?
First of all, thank you for joining me. I've said it so many times, like it's a huge honor. If I was a musician, it would be like talking to Rolling Stones or I'm serious, man. So this is definitely, a huge privilege for me, and I'm so excited to have you here.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate it.
I don't know how much people know about you, but there's so many things to learn and so many things to actually know. And you've been a type designer, a graphic designer, a creative director. You have had 2 magazines, if I remember correctly. You have started your own record label, which is an amazing thing. You're a musician. You have a couple of books of your own by now, with the latest one is Universal Principles of Typography, which is an amazing book. So tell me something we don't know about you, or something I don't know about you. Start with something that's not really out there and not so available to everyone.
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you. That's really, really kind of you, Alan, to say all those things. I think you kind of got everything. The reason that I've done all those things is because I'm really old. Maybe I'm not so secretly old because I'm going grey now. But I think for a while people didn't know that I was actually quite old, and that is that is why I've got a long list of projects. But yeah, you covered loads of stuff. You covered loads and loads of things. Something that a lot of people think about me is they think I'm a type designer, whereas I'm not a type designer yet. Although I have dabbled by doing the course run by Victor Baltus, who I see is here. I just saw a little wave there, so hi, Victor. And actually, that's how I know you, because Victor did a post where he showed some work of some students from the class. And I think I just was like, wow, there's some amazing type designers coming out of this. And one of them was you, and I followed you, and I followed a bunch of the others that he'd mentioned. And I was also amazed because you'd just done the course, but I was like, this person clearly knows what they're doing already. They've done loads and loads of fonts. So so maybe that's the secret thing. That's what we don't yet know, is that that's actually how I'm aware of your work. And it's very kind of you to say that I'm prolific, because I think that you are very prolific, because it feels like every day there's a new typeface coming out of Silverstake Type Foundry. So hats off to you.
No, I mean, thank you. I've been, it's been a busy week, busy year, not a busy week. And there's been a lot of new things here at my foundry and a lot of different developments. And I don't know, some people call me a robot sometimes or a wizard. But, I don't know. I just like to do it. I mean, I have been doing fonts before the Victor's course, but I actually have a feeling I can learn so much from him. And it was something that definitely is for everyone who wants to do a font course, who wants to learn more. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I thoroughly recommend it. And sorry, man. I was going to say, I thoroughly recommend that course. I've not fully completed it yet. Don't kill me, Victor. But and I fully intend, like, there's this kind of side quest of becoming a type designer. I think because for so many years people assumed, because I'm sort of worked in the type industry in various different roles and so have a lot of connections to foundries and font distribution services and stuff like that, but people assume that I was a type designer. And for many years I was like, I don't have the patience for this. There's no way I could be a type designer. I need to move on from one project to the next too quickly. But I don't know, something's changed in me in the last couple of years where I've started to entertain the idea of maybe, I don't know, I feel like maybe it's like a retirement project.
You never know, yeah.
that could be it. And one of my closest friends is Jamie Clark, who runs an amazing type foundry, and he now lives in the same village as me. He's not here right now because he's on holiday in Australia, but he's very, very close geographically, and we're very, very close as friends. And he has very kindly offered to sit down with me and kind of take me through after I finish my course to go through to the next stage. And great to have a resource like that literally just up the road. So we'll see. I think at some point it's going to happen. I just need to get some other projects out first.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of happening in your side as well. So, but let's go back to the beginning. How did you even start with design industry, not just type, but website design? I know you did them as well, but so
right, yeah.
Tell us more about it.
Yeah, you and I have a little bit of a similar journey, don't we? In that we're old enough to remember Flash. I guess design for me started. There was actually a kind of I'd always drawn as a kid. I just drawing the whole time, the whole childhood. And then at some point during school, I was drawing a lot. I was doing some comic books, which I was sort of self-publishing. I was sort of drawing sort of posters for school events and things like that. And obviously that starts to creep into design in terms of, having, thinking about words and stuff in addition to the illustrations. And so I kind of started to get into it, design that way. And because I was doing comic books, I had an early version of Photoshop and was doing like kind of layout in a very rudimentary sense through that. And then the really pivotal thing was that when I took a year out before going to university, so I finished high school and I worked in Virgin Megastore in a record shop that doesn't exist anymore, but that was quite big in the UK for a while. And my friends there were not, with a big group of us were all musicians. We were all making actually some quite bad music, but our managers very kindly allowed us to put out a CD in have it on the storefront, like actually have it like in the store. There was a POS, there was a point of sale. I did the artwork for this little compilation, and you could buy it, and we technically outsold Prince that one week that it came out. There was a new Prince compilation, and we sold more than that, which was like 7 copies or something. But we did that, and I was in charge of doing the website as well for it, and I used this WYSIWYG website creator called Homestead, and I did that, and that it just ignited in me this whole, it was like this meeting of music and design, but in this whole new medium. So this was like 2001. So the web was still pretty young, and Flash had just started to become a thing. So I then went to university and started doing some stuff with Flash. And around about this time, there were some people doing some really amazing sites. Those folks, High Res, that agency in London, they were doing stuff like the Donnie Darko website, which was groundbreaking at the time. There was My Pet Skeleton. There were just Joshua Davis was like the first incarnation of PlayStation. loads of pioneering people doing great things with Flash, and it just for me, I just ended up doing a bunch of sort of music related sites for myself and for friends' bands on the side throughout university, just because I wanted to do it. I was just genuinely interested in it. And then when I left university, I ended up with like a portfolio of, purely by chance, loads of music websites. And then that got me my first sort of quote unquote proper job for the record label EMI when I left university. And I was a junior web designer there, doing Flash sites for like real bands, which was amazing. And then everything kind of went from there, really.
Okay, that's quite a good story. You mentioned we had definitely some things in common in our career. We started with Flash, and then transferred to other things. And when Flash started dying slowly, and for me, it was amazing, to actually be able to work on websites with so many animations in a moment when most of the websites were like so boring, so limited with type. And I was just like researching about you and about what to ask you. And like in 2009, you couldn't even like use a proper font in a website.
Yeah, exactly.
And so many people don't know that today. Like you were restricted to Comic Sans and some other versions from Microsoft.
Totally.
And that was like, and today you can put whatever you want out there. And it's like so crazy how time changes, which leads me to the Typekit. So I was talking about all the fonts we couldn't really use in websites back then. It was horrible, and which leads me to the Typekit and how it actually transformed how we use fonts in websites today. And you were a creative director for Typekit, later Adobe Fonts. That's what was the experience to actually work on such a groundbreaking project?
It was amazing, and yeah, to think of you're right. Like back in the day, there was no such thing as web fonts, and that was really really transformative, because I felt like around that time when web fonts were becoming a thing, Typekit was around. This was pre-Google Fonts. There was a few other. There was like Font Deck was one that offered a similar service. But it felt like web design had kind of grown up quite a bit. Like we'd been living with web standards for a bit, and you could do loads of things with CSS, and it was just kind of becoming a bit more. We moved away from Flash, and the next stage of that was then being able to do stuff with other typefaces other than system fonts. And it was amazing when Typekit came along and offered that opportunity. I mean, obviously, just before that, you could technically, like, web font support became a thing, but there was no way of doing that in the way that was kind of that was respectful to the foundries, because you just put font files on the server and people could just download, view source and download them. So Typekit was the first that kind of came along and enabled a way of sort of obfuscating those files. And it was great because, so I came on board just after they'd been acquired by Adobe, and I was taking over from Jason Santamaria, who had just left. And Jason Santamaria was like one of my all-time favorite web designers, someone I've always looked up to and continue to look up to. And at the time, it was really amazing to be sort of taking over from him. And so I joined Typekit when it was still very much a web font service, but there was this sort of hints of this desktop fonts and syncing fonts and things like this. This was new, and it's funny to think of that now, because obviously while I was there, we kind of transformed the service to be kind of desktop first, to be all about syncing fonts to your device. And gradually over the years, the website of things still exists, but is obviously a very, very small part of the service now. And what people now know as Adobe Fonts is obviously all about desktop fonts. But when I joined, it was amazing. So this was 2013, I think. Just over 10 years ago. And it was great because I got to help shape the service and kind of evolve it from what it was into sort of something closer to what it is now. But I also get to play around with fonts all day, and I got to design loads of printed stuff, some T-shirts, anytime we sponsored a conference, there was lots of ephemera there that I got to design. and I was just learning loads. I was still running Eight Faces magazine as well at the time. So I was just kind of immersed in this type world and learning loads from the people that I was talking to, and the magazine side of things and the day job side of things. And it was, a really, really exciting time. And now I'm actually back at Adobe Fonts now, doing some consultancy for them, which is great fun because a lot of that old team are still there. So I'm getting to work with some old friends again, which is lovely.
Oh, that's amazing. How does working for Adobe differs from smaller companies and smaller teams? What's the main difference? I mean, we all know like there's probably more procedures and paperwork and everything, but what would you say is the main difference?
I think the main difference that I found when I was there to begin with, and fine now, and it's the same when I was at some other bigger companies, such as doing some stuff at Google, was that the pace of things is a lot slower. So if you compare that to agency life or startup life, where it's kind of very scrappy and everyone's kind of struggling to finish everything, and the music industry was so hectic. It was, every new marketing website or mail or whatever it was we were producing had to be done. They needed it yesterday kind of thing. But the pace of things, the bigger tech companies, I think, is a lot more sort of considered and slower. There are more people involved and there's more process there. And I think for me initially, that was a really big surprise coming to that when I'd sort of come from at that time kind of more agency sort of startup-y kind of life. But yeah, it's actually really nice that you get to spend your time really honing and crafting something.
Okay. Oh, that feels really, like not every big company is like forcing you to work all the time. So that's really great.
It's a great change of pace, actually.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I've been a freelancer all my life, and I'm really glad about it because I ran my own design agency at some point, and now I'm completely again on my own. And I like this, so I understand that. But it's definitely, good to know how big companies work, and so that's quite cool.
Yeah.
You have mentioned your magazine, Eight Faces. How did you go into the print world? How did you actually decide, like, okay, let's start a magazine? Like, where did the idea come from? And
that was kind of twofold. On the one hand, it was that I was a web designer exclusively at the time and had done little bits of print work, but nothing substantial. I did like some CD packaging for friends' bands, and I did, the occasional poster or flyer and things like that. But I'd never done anything substantial. The magazine is, quite a big thing. So I wanted to do something a bit, something physical and something big that would, be last. It would be put on people's shelves and sit there for hopefully many years. And so there was a real desire to do something that would last. But at the same time, it was also at that pivotal point that I mentioned where web fonts had become more of a thing. Web design as a whole had kind of grown up, and web designers were just very into typography. Now, at the time, I knew almost nothing about type and typography. I mean, I was a real novice. I knew nothing, and when I did the first issue, I sort of had this idea, and I put the word out, and I put together like a mailing list, and then to my surprise, purely sort of accidental from, I guess, the traction on Twitter at the time, obviously Twitter was a very different place back then. I got loads of people sign up, and then when I announced the magazine that I was going to do it, and that I invited these people to be interviewees in the magazine, they all said yes. People like who was in the first issue, Jason Santamaria, again, Jessica Hirsch, Eric Spiekerman, all these people that I looked up to, and would love to have in this magazine. They all said yes, and then I had to do it, and I had to go out and make this thing. And then all these people had signed up to this list and wanted to buy it, and it sold out in the first hour or two, I think it was. We only did 1,000 copies of the first issue, but still, it was a big thing, and and it was a niche audience, but it was like a very captive audience, So, and then I did the first issue, and I instantly realized that I was just so much I didn't know about print design and didn't know about type. I didn't know about the subject matter. I certainly knew nothing about editing and running a magazine. But over the course of the 8 issues, I just learned loads from just putting it together and physically designing it, the sort of the back end stuff, like the editorial, the liaising with distributors, with printers, with contributors. So all of that kind of more managerial stuff, which really helped me when I then started working for Typekit. But also just learning loads about type, just being totally immersed in subject matter. And it was just a huge learning experience. And that was it. And I'm really glad I did it, because it was a selfishly motivated side project. I wanted to just have this thing I could put on shelves. But it has led to so many things. It led to my first role at Adobe and various other type connections, and kind of everything else that I've done since then has not necessarily come entirely from Eight Faces, but it is very much, that was the start of sort of being involved in the type world. And that's, I'm very, very, very grateful for the connections made during that period.
Okay, I understand that, that part where you actually start something and you have no idea what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like, I've started this podcast, I first wanted to just put my face out there, for people to know, because I've been in the industry for so long, and so many people on Instagram and in the emails and everything. And like I said, okay, let's just do a live on Instagram. And then I figure oh, it would be so cool to talk to someone, Then I called Stacy, which is a really good friend. She runs her own type foundry. Then I contacted you, one of the role models, in the world. And honestly, and you said yes. And then Sam Parrott as well,
yes.
GM Tamti, German designer, which amazing stuff. So it's just running on its own, Now I'm learning about audio editing and using the microphone correctly. It's a whole different world.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I understand that part for sure. I've stumbled upon one thing that I didn't know about you.
Oh yeah.
I think your first book. It's yes. I had no idea about it. I will just say that the title was forced on you. Okay.
It was.
We will accept that. Yeah, I saw that in your website. But tell me more about the sexy web design.
Sexy web design, yeah. I have a group of friends who have known me since those days, and they still continue to take the mickey out of me for that book. So it kind of came about actually because Gina Bolton, sorry, his name is now Gina Ann. She was writing a series of articles about CSS called, I think it's called Sexy Style Sheets, and she had proposed an idea for the book. And then, unfortunately, she had proposed the idea to the publisher, and they liked it. But unfortunately, she then sort of wasn't able to do the book. But the publisher kind of had this idea, and then Gina said, "Oh, would you be interested in kind of taking this and evolving this?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And so we kind of worked together, and then I came up with Gina had done a lot of the kind of prep material, and then I sort of fleshed that out a little bit, and then sort of became the author of that book to actually then go away and write it. But the trouble was that the publisher had already kind of set up this name that had tied into her Sexy Style Sheets blog post that she'd been doing, and apparently pre-sales had been very strong, and they just refused to change the name, which was a shame. I tried for a really long time, but no, and I kind of feel like I've written it out of history, by not mentioning it too much. But since having the new book out, of course, now on Amazon, if you click on my author name, you're like, oh yeah, he's written this other book back in 2009, I think it was. So yeah, now it's all coming out again, basically. But it's a horribly dated title, which I wanted no part of, and the book itself is pretty dated, really. It's a bit of a time capsule for web design around that period. It's got using CSS sprites to have text in images and then moving them around when you hover over stuff. It's like I said, it's a time capsule for sure.
Yeah. No, I was like, wow, this sounds like so 2005, you know? I mean, I imagined the publisher and everything going with, yeah, this is a strong title for that period of time. But so I was like, oh my God, like, look at this. It's so cool, you know? And then, but before we go to to talk about the new book, I just want to remind the people to ask questions. We will answer them at the end. And one of them will get the book, free shipping, everything included. But before that, I actually would like to talk about your music. Just tell me about it. You know, how did you go into the music industry? And again, starting your own record label, which is like not a common thing again. Did you know what you were going into? How did it work?
No, like most things, I usually have no idea what I'm doing. And if I did know, then I wouldn't do it. But yeah, the music thing just came from, well, I mentioned to you that sort of way back, I was doing some music from when I was, a late teenager. And terrible music, really, really bad music. I'm definitely cringing and not linking anyone up to that at all. But yeah, I've always done music and just sort of had it ticking over in the background, not being very serious about it. And then around about, when would it have been? I don't know, like around 2015, something like that, which is when we had our first daughter. So like a really bad time to be getting into like another side project. When you've got a young baby, there was something I've never really been to techno, but some artists sort of came across my radar that I just sort of saw this other side of it, and was like, wow, it's really interesting. I love the sound design, and it was very repetitive, but this kind of like almost sort of meditative kind of state. And I some people doing some really stuff. There's this guy called Shifted, this artist called Monic, and I was just amazed. And at exactly the same time, Korg brought out these machines, these really cheap little synths called the Volkers. There's loads of them now, but they brought out 3. And I've always loved hardware, like, actually being able to interact with a real physical thing. And I got these. I was like, I'm just going to treat myself and just play around with these little synths. And just that mix of this suddenly like new side of listening to music and this interest in interacting with something physical again, just kind of coalesced into like, wow, I really want to make music that's like what I'm hearing and using these analog machines. And a real like proper catalyst moment around then. And so I started doing it. I got a bit more serious about it, and I kind of wanted to kind of prove to myself, I think, that I was more serious about it. I thought, I'm going to put a record out. I'm going to put an actual physical vinyl record out. So I recorded the CP, I got it mastered, I got the vinyl pressed, and in doing so, kind of had to make a record label, basically. I mean, in a very lo-fi sense of the term, but actually that's kind of how most like techno labels are. They're usually like 1 or 2 people doing it in a very lo-fi kind of manner. And initially it was just so I could release my own music. But then over time, actually in 2020, it wasn't because of the pandemic, because I already had like plans to do this anyway, but I decided I wanted to open it up, do a compilation, and then do some EPs from some other artists. And so it became more of a record label in the truer sense of the word, releasing some stuff. And I also, again, wanting to kind of do physical media as well, release some cassettes, because vinyl kind of became prohibitively expensive, and the time scales as well. There was like a factory that made one component used in the process, in the manufacture of vinyl, that burnt down. I think it was in Japan. It was either in Japan or the States, and it ended up being that there was only one other factory in the world that made this particular thing that was required by all of these vinyl pressing plants. Wow. And that and COVID and people kind of the resurgence in vinyl just meant that lead times were like over like a year, and it was just kind of became crazy. So I started experimenting with some cassettes and put some of them out, because I think even though very few people actually play the cassettes, it's nice to have some kind of physical representation of music to put on your shelves. You can see there's a theme here, and since then I've kind of over time I've then kind of just made it just purely digital. It's been fun, but I became very serious about it until this last year. From the beginning of this year until now, I've barely made any music this year, and that's because I've mainly focused on more of my typographic side projects, like the book and the podcast and the newsletter and day job stuff and everything. And so I kind of put music on a little bit of a temporary hiatus this year. But up until from sort of 2015 until the beginning of this year, I was doing a lot of music, putting a bunch out on a bunch of different labels, and then very fortunate to get to know some artists and DJs who are kind of in big-ish in that scene, who've played my music in a bunch of clubs, which has been amazing. Luke Slater has been really supportive and played a bunch of stuff. He played one of my tracks in Berghain on New Year's Eve like a couple of years ago, which was very cool. And Charlotte DeWitter played one of my tracks during COVID when she and her boyfriend were doing this big live stream thing on a roof, and my track opened up their live set, which was great. I had no idea. I just suddenly the music was getting added to all these playlists on Spotify, and people were saying from this thing, and I just had to look it up. And there it was on YouTube, and I started getting royalties from YouTube every month after, which was great. Not much. I mean, there's no money to be made in music or books, but it's nice to get it out there. It's nice to think that other people were listening to it. It wasn't just me listening to it in the studio, sending it out, and no one ever kind of then having it at all, experiencing it anyway. So yeah, it's nice. But so I'm kind of at the point now where I want to make some more music. I'm kind of thinking that I'm just find some time in the Christmas holidays I've got some sort of a new direction I'd like to take things in. So I'm going to dust off the machines and try some of that.
Looking forward to that. Yeah.
Thank you.
No, I mean, I've been I didn't for years, but I played piano before, and I went to musical school and everything. And,
cool.
But I literally had no time for years. When you run your own agency, you have project all day long, and now the Type Studio, and it's
yes.
But it's definitely something I would also like to, take back and take some time to do it. But let's see how the next year goes. I'm not over the holidays, definitely not. No time for that. But let's see how the new year goes. Yeah.
Yeah. I also find that I have less stamina to for a long time I would at least one day a week I would go out into the office. So where I am now is a little outbuilding that we have in our garden. And I would go out at least one night. My wife would go to bed. Obviously, the kids would be in bed. And then I would just stay up till the early hours making music. And I would do that a good one day a week, usually. But this last year, I've just felt, I found it harder to find the energy for that, I think, because of just all of the other stuff going on. So need to kind of get my mojo back and learn how to stay up late again.
Yeah. Well, we are getting older, so
exactly.
Coffees, Red Bull, whatever. Yeah, give it a shot. We have a good question right now.
Great.
What is your experience with merging music and typography, the passion for those two? What's your experience with that?
I mean, I guess my experience with that is that everything that I've done to do with sort of typography has, in a way, could be traced back to those early experiments with music that led to doing album covers and websites. And certainly, for years I was exclusively a web designer, and that definitely came from that thing that I mentioned from Virgin Megastore. But recently, I think a lot of the music related stuff that I've done, whether that's record covers for myself, for other folks I've put out on my label, or for artwork that I've done for other labels, has been that's allowed me to do stuff that my other projects, whether that's day job stuff or other things, wouldn't allow for. So I've got to still experiment with typography, and it's great. I get to just any excuse to play around with some new fonts is great. And sometimes you have restrictions where you're working with some clients where they want to use free fonts. So, it's kind of using that as some restraint when you're choosing type as well. So that's been something that I've done for other clients and stuff. But I've done a lot of stuff. So I did a lot for the label Unterwegs, who are a Berlin-based techno label, and then I did a bunch for Luke Slater as well for his label Motorvolver, doing some general cover design, but obviously typography as part of that as well. So it's nice. Music has allowed me to do things that I probably wouldn't otherwise get to do for clients or for my day job, I reckon.
Okay, that's amazing. You've worked across all possible mediums, I would say. Do you have like a favorite? Print, digital, music?
Yeah, I don't have a favorite because I think I always like to jump between the different media. So I mean, I would never be happy just doing web stuff. That's why I kind of started doing print stuff, because I was frustrated with the web being so ephemeral, disappearing so quickly. And then with print, that becomes frustrating because you suddenly print 5,000 copies of a magazine and realize there's a binding issue or a typo or something like that. And I can't just fix it. So you go back to digital stuff. And music's always been kind of something that I've done on the side anyway. I think I'm just continually, I just love I think I just a very short attention span, and I like to flit between different things. I can't sort of stay on any one thing for too long. And that's why I've enjoyed, it's funny, kind of working back at Adobe now, and prior to that, I was doing a lot of client work for the Type founders. So I was designing some Foundry sites. And in a way, it was slightly been getting back to my roots in the sense of doing some very website specific stuff. But it's less like back in the day, it was, designing from scratch, developing from scratch, doing the whole thing from start to finish, looking after everything from, this was like pre UX design. So this was like, there weren't even, maybe there were wireframes just about at the beginning, but from the very earliest sketch through to putting it on a server, I did the whole thing. Whereas obviously these days I don't really do any like production code or anything like that. But yeah, I think just being able to do a little bit of everything is fun, and one project always informs the other, one medium always informs the other, and so that's always nice to kind of like take a learning from something and then apply it to something else.
Okay, well, that's good answer. Yeah, I would say.
By the way, I can see that someone has said they're thinking back to Flash on the Beach here, and Flash on the Beach was a fantastic conference, which then became Reasons to, run by John Davey, who is a lovely guy. Good times.
Yeah. Okay, let me see. There are a couple of other questions. Well, I will connect one of the questions with your other magazine that you were a co-founder with Lagom, if I'm pronounced correctly. Yeah. Okay, perfect. And it's about, as far as I can, understand everything, about the balance between life, work, and everything else.
Totally.
And you have actually done so many different things. And you have a family as well. And how do you actually balance all of that? Is there even like an advice you could give, or it's just like, I do whatever comes at the moment? How does it work for you?
It's a good question. The magazine Lagom was about celebrating folks who sort of found this kind of work-life balance and doing interesting creative projects. I think I've always, because I've always done a lot of side projects, that's inevitably meant doing a lot of stuff on the outside of, traditional working hours, day jobs, and sort of, like I said, staying up late to do a bit of extra music or whatever. But since having a family, I've always been very, very strict about being around for my daughters and being there. I go in at 5 o'clock and make sure we all go and eat dinner together. And occasionally I'll then need to nip out for like a call or maybe to do a little bit of admin. But generally I'm then around until they go to bed. So, do the bedtime routine. And then there's a little bit of extra. So my newsletter, for instance, is probably my biggest side project I've got going on right now. So I'll, when the girls are in bed, I'll probably do maybe a little bit of work on my newsletter, or I just sort of fit it into, while on a dog walk, or maybe a little bit every now and again at the end of the day. But I think it's about sort of like finding the time, but not finding the time at the expense of missing out on family time and stuff like that. And obviously this isn't exclusive to people with families, spending time with your partner or with friends, or just making sure that you are treating yourself well as well. It's not about working every hour. But I've been very fortunate in that a lot of my quote unquote like day jobs have been me as a contractor rather than an employee. I've kind of structured it that way, which has given me a little bit more freedom as well in terms of doing little bits and pieces on the side, not necessarily always being beholden to traditional working hours and stuff like that. So I've always kind of pushed for flexibility with whoever I'm working for or with, and always just been very kind of as I say, just very, very strict with myself about being around for the folks that need me. I know some people who just work crazy hours and have to miss out a lot of family time, and they get paid lots of money. But I would always rather take the quality of life over the money. I think obviously money is great. Money is an enabler to certain things, and I think it's good as well to maybe to do like a decent paying job for a high paying client for a bit, if that then enables you to take some more time off later and perhaps indulge in a project, and it kind of affords you some of those freedoms. But for me, that quality of life, the work-life balance, the family time is always going to be the thing that is more important than the money, for sure.
That's so cool. Sam actually said the same thing, last week. I was asking him about the life balance and everything, and he said up until, 2:00, he works, then kids come from school, and then it's all about the kids. And that's really, really great. As you said, money is there to allow us to do a lot of things and everything, but somehow you actually need to find a good balance to each of us to devote their time to what matters the most for them. So
exactly. I mean, I always think about how I think you don't want to kind of look back on your life, and I think you're never going to look back and wish that you'd put out more, or you'd hit more deadlines, or you'd kind of got more client work, or you put out more things. I mean, maybe there's a little bit of balance there, but you would look back and go, oh man, I regret not spending the time with the kids, or being kind to myself when I needed a break, and that kind of thing. I think I try and treat it with that perspective. And then obviously, sometimes it goes horribly wrong, and occasionally you've got to just dive in and get some stuff done. But generally speaking, I think I've always tried to kind of live by that sense of balance. Hopefully achieve it most of the time.
Respect for that.
Thank you.
There was a question as well about your advice for new designers. What would you say to them? What to do?
I would say two things. One, don't get forced down into one particular aspect of design, or one particular medium, or one particular skill set. Just if you're young, embrace it all. Do stuff across different media. Do stuff for different clients. Do stuff for your friends on the side. Don't get to sort of get to this kind of tunnel vision into one particular thing, because although it is very good to have a something that you are a specialist in. I think there's a real danger in over specializing, that you sort of paint yourself into a corner, and then if you suddenly find at some point that you're not enjoying that work anymore, suddenly all of your experience, all of your portfolio, all of your skill set is based around one particular thing. And I think as much, if you can diversify, even in just little bits for side projects, for friends, for family, for whatever, it can really help you gain a broader picture, and especially from kind of like a business perspective as well, to sort of, whether it's running an agency or sort of doing more kind of director level position, having an understanding of how all of these different moving parts fit together is probably stronger than being the one expert on, I don't know, creating social media graphics or something like that. So, and the other thing I think is just to always be open to change, and open to not worry too much if you're not enjoying something. Like, it's okay to say, I'm not enjoying this anymore and I've changed my mind about something. I think there's so much, especially in kind of the tech industry, of people going, you have to do this thing, and you have to grow, and you have to, believe in it, and passion. And like, I'm a strong believer in passion projects. So follow your passion projects. And if you're not passionate about them anymore, it's okay to kind of step aside. I think that's really important. People don't talk enough about that. I mean, people talk about like failing. Yeah, go out and fail big, fail early, all this kind of thing. But it's not about failing. It's about sort of being true to the kind of work that you want to do and the kind of person you want to be, I think.
Well, a lot of lessons, There's another question that everyone is talking about AI right now, and what's your point of view of how it will? I mean, I have to, people are asking.
Yeah, what is this AI thing? I'm not sure anyone's mentioned it to me. I feel like 2024 is going to be this year where we look back and it's the year where like every single person like managed to fit the word AI into every other sentence throughout the year. It is just everywhere. It is absolutely everywhere. I have really mixed feelings about it. So on the one hand, like, I do use AI. I use I mean, not loads. I would say I use AI from a more of a productivity side of things. So I was putting together I am still in the process of putting together a proper website for my music project, because it's running on like this WYSIWYG thing on persona.co. And I'm finally doing a proper site for it. And there was just some stuff that was kind of outside of my skill set with some JavaScript that I just asked Claude to come up with something, and it worked. And it was a little bit messy to begin with, but I sort of knew enough to kind of like whittle it down to something that was usable. And things like that. And occasionally dictating some things and having some AI kind of clean up some of those thoughts. But I mean, very occasionally. In terms of creativity, I've never yet used AI to kind of make... Actually, no, that's not true. I did use AI to generate some imagery, which I then went on to manipulate further for one of Luke's EP covers. And that was cool, because we didn't have a budget to kind of do anything, to shoot something bespoke. And the stock imagery we're finding was not really working, so we kind of co-made this thing with AI with Midjourney, which then manipulated further. But I do, I have such mixed feelings about it, because obviously there is a very real sense of it, even in the examples I gave, of using AI instead of paying someone to do something, or using learning a skill so that you can do it. And I think the pessimist in me would say, oh, that's not great because you're doing someone out of a job. The optimist in me would say, well, okay, you're not having to learn that skill set, and that person that you would have paid to do it is no longer learning that skill set. But there's other things happening instead, in the same way that, when we were... so my dad was a graphic designer, and when Photoshop came along, he was like, oh, but what about, Illustrator came on, what about drawing? I've learned all these ways to draw these, like, he used to illustrate car manuals. So he did these big exploded diagrams of like car engine parts pulled apart, and drawing them with a pen and mechanical pens and rulers, and measuring all this isometric view and stuff like that. And in a sense, AI is no different from that, in that you no longer have to learn how to draw those things. There is the computer allowed us a shortcut to that, those skills, and instead you have new skills in understanding Bezier curves in Illustrator and stuff like that. So in the same way that there was a transition there, I think thinking about it positively, the same thing is happening with AI. I think where AI is maybe different to desktop publishing revolution, for instance, is that it is progressing at such a crazy fast rate, and that it is somewhat, I don't mean in a self-aware way, but that it's progressing at, it's kind of, I don't know. I have a problem with the fact that AI has absorbed so much content, because that content is required to train models. And I think the problem I have with it, and the pessimism I feel about it, is that you can see artists' work being replicated by AI, and that's not a question of, oh well, would this person have commissioned this artist to make a piece of art from? Like, of course, no. Like that was not a thing. But that sense, you can see kind of publishers and folks going, well, I don't really need to, use an Illustrator when I can use something and get halfway there. And you are starting to see it with big publishers, even folks doing adverts, for the Coke advert and stuff like that. And it's, I don't know. I think I do have mixed feelings about it. I think there's great potential, but it's escalating at such a rate, and is having to hoover up so much creativity that other people have put out there. There's something about it that in many uses does kind of bother me. I wrote a blog post quite recently about how a lot of people have objected to Meta's use of AI. But it's not about Meta. It's about all those other third-party companies who have come along and gone, we're going to OpenAI saying, hey, we're going to use any content that's deemed to be in the public, to be public. So anything that's not hidden behind, say, a private Instagram account or anything like that. If you posted it, if it's public, if it's a story and it's a highlight and it's public, it's all fair game. So it's not just about Meta. It's about all of these other companies who are going, hey, we will come and hoover up all of that content and use it to train our models. And there's something about that feels, dubious. I would say.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Like they lack a bit of ethics on that part. I mean, recently I stumbled upon an article about AI, not sure which company, generating video. It might be ChatGPT, Sora, but it seems like they actually took old videos from YouTube, put them in the learning machine, and then even from Marcus Brownlee, the guy that actually does reviews, the plant from his desk was the same plant that AI generated. And it's somehow, it's a plant. Who cares about plant? But it actually pulls you to think about other things that it might do. So, I believe it's a good tool because you can do a lot of things, you couldn't do before. Like you mentioned scripts. I stumbled upon another reel from James Bernard from Australia, and he, asked ChatGPT to write him a script for some short thing to actually fix in Photoshop. And that was, great thing for productivity. It's, but on the other side, you have the ethical part that's not really going into the right direction, at least not for now. So
I think also there's that sense of people just not being aware of the pace of things. So when if you take like the invention of the computer, or more like desktop publishing becoming a thing, there was the people's lives that it impacted. It was very obvious, and it was like to a degree like a subset of society, whereas now I think general people in the public who aren't working in tech are perhaps unaware of quite how AI is changing things and quite how fast it's changing. Like I said, a lot of people just, I think, posting pictures of their kids on Instagram and not realizing that data is being kind of sucked up. And I think this is maybe why AI is potentially a little bit different from some of the previous kind of tech revolutions, in that it's got the potential to sort of sneak in there, I think, in a way that is concerning to some degree. And I'm not against it by any means. It just feels a bit different. But then, hey, maybe everyone who's ever gone through a tech evolution has said the same thing.
Yeah,
It feels different this time.
Who knows?
Shouting at the sky.
Yeah. We'll see how it goes. I don't know. Here in Europe, we'll probably forbid a lot of things and add some regulations about it, but we'll see, how it works. We've been here almost an hour, and I don't want to take too much of your time. There's still a couple of questions I want to ask.
Sure.
Okay, so first there's a question by someone. What do you think about marketing professionals at major companies who believe they can handle design themselves using ready-made templates or tools like Canva instead of hiring designers?
Yeah, I mean, those tools are there for that exact purpose. I mean, let's be honest about that. That is why they exist. So that people can do it themselves without the need for an external designer. I think it's a real mixed bag, and I certainly don't have the answer, and I don't think anyone has the answer really, because it's so dependent on the context of, are we talking about a massive company that previously, up until this last year, is hiring professional designers to do a job and is now choosing to not hire them and save a load of money, but those designers are now struggling to find work? Like, is that the case? Or is it a case of there's a kind of sort of one-person bands where they would not have the budget to do anything anyway, and they would try and do it themselves and make a bad job at it, and they're now able to do something that isn't terrible because they have a well-made template library? And then there's the whole gamut in between, it's, on the one hand, it is very easy to say, you've taken the job away from a designer, an illustrator, a photographer, a videographer, a musician, so many people who could be impacted by this. But I think there are lots of instances where the people using those tools are not the same people who would have paid that money for those creatives to do the work, or to license the work from them, maybe. It's really interesting. I honestly don't have the answer. I think it's almost a case by case basis, and it's changing, because a year ago, it's also the quality of a service. Obviously, there's Canva, there's Adobe, have Adobe Express and similar things where there are great templates there, but people have designed those templates. They've been made there. That is changing. The sheer size of the libraries of these templates is something that is improving, and you need that to grow, because otherwise everyone's using the same templates and it all looks the same. But also the technology is changing. So now, if you look at this time last year, those tools can do things that otherwise would be difficult. So you might have previously been able to have a template, but you realize you needed a slightly different size, and the resizing is kind of janky, and now the resizing works really well in those tools, and suddenly that kind of thing starts to work. Suddenly there's some elements of AI that understand your intent a bit better, and yeah, I think it's just changing so quickly. It's really hard to say. Like, obviously, it's not great that if there's a creative who is finding it hard to get work because AI is, taken the job effectively. That is not a great situation. Some businesses will think that's a great situation because they're saving loads of money. But I think it is a case of adapting as well, that in the same way that my dad no longer had to draw things with their hands and rulers and pens and a big old artboard and was having to learn how to use computers, there is that sense of artists and illustrators and filmmakers and musicians using AI in a way to help them as well. It's so hard. It's so hard. Again, I don't have the answer. And I think if anything, I'm probably ever so slightly more on the skeptical side of AI in general. But, that things change on a daily basis.
Yeah, it can be difficult, but somehow, especially when we talk about tools like Canva and Adobe Express and those kind of things where you have a lot of templates, and after all, you have like somehow even a font is a template, you don't have to design it yourself for a designer. And on that side, somehow to me, it is about reinventing yourself, If, for example, you did graphic design for a company before, and maybe now you could actually take all of that knowledge and make some templates. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Just to change things a bit about yourself. And I have a feeling a lot of designers nowadays, are criticizing Canva and everything, but there is an opportunity in each part of those, industries, softwares, apps. There is always something you can do. I mean, you have done so many different things, and you know a lot about it. But somehow, I prefer to see opportunities there, and not just. I mean, there is a negative part in all those big companies replacing like a lot of designers with templates, with AI and everything. And I understand people are worried and everything, but there is also an opportunity in each of those parts. So,
and in a way, it's no different from when I was thinking back to like when I was sort of starting out web design, doing freelance work, and I was doing the whole thing from the initial sketches through to like sorting out my clients' hosting and stuff like that. And then things like Squarespace came along, and it was great that I didn't have to do it anymore, and I could still design them a site and set them up with something and kind of help them, but I didn't have to worry about that back end side of it, or even the coding side of it. For some sites, but for some, for this Squarespace thing. And that was a good thing. Hey, I did have to use my time and my skills on this thing, and now I don't have to, and I'm okay with it. And similarly, I think it's like if we can still do creative work, but some of the more tedious tasks, we can say, okay, now we can kind of semi-automate that to a degree. Then in a sense, it's no different from that. So yeah. I think there's positives and negatives for sure.
Yeah. To everything. Okay, there was one question that I'm quite interested to ask. Adobe fonts versus Google fonts. You have worked on both. I mean, I see the differences and everything, but someone asked, so Adobe fonts or Google fonts? I don't know if you're allowed to answer that question.
I mean, I think I'm allowed in the sense of me being a contractor rather than an employee. So I'm not employed by Adobe, but I'm not sure that it would be sensible for me to answer the question. I think it's I mean, I have worked for Google Fonts and Adobe Fonts. They're different offerings. They sort of are not necessarily the same user base in many ways. I think Adobe Fonts obviously has the sort of the bigger. Do I say this? I'm not going to answer the question. Sorry.
No, I'm
gonna have to keep you guessing. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. There's one question, since it's about Type Foundry, that like how to start it. I'm guessing it's for me because
it's for you,
yeah. Did I start my own website? I still don't have my own website, so I'm probably
you use Gumroad, right?
Yeah, I'm
Yes.
using Gumroad at the moment. I'm selling it. I started selling on Creative Market at the beginning. I'm still there. I do some things on Etsy as well, but Etsy is a bit, I don't know. And their copyright policies are not what I see to be, like the right thing. So I also sell on a couple of different things. So definitely whoever's starting, you don't really need your own website to start making fonts, to start selling fonts. There's a lot of great platforms that will allow you to be able to sell them like without that hassle that you actually have to buy hosting, buy a domain name, and like figure all of those things out. So definitely my motto is just start. I am working on a website, like figuring things out right now, like taking time probably after the holidays in January when things are a bit slower to, work on that and hopefully launch it early next year. But
That's
yeah,
exciting.
you definitely don't need a website to start that. I will ask you just two more questions.
Sure.
The first one is the book, and
Yeah.
tell me more about it. I've read it like from the beginning. It's an amazing thing. If you are a type designer, if you are a graphic web designer, like there's so many different things in here, like that you really need in your everyday life. And the things that I've noticed a lot of designers don't really implement in their work. When we talk about kerning and everything, there's so many useful things for everyone. I'm not paid to give like a commercial for the book, but it's an amazing read for every designer out there. But tell me, how did you come up with the idea, and how did you actually manage to put it all like in all those 100 principles? Like, give me more info.
I just used AI to do the whole thing. No, I was very fortunate because I was approached by the publisher who they are already publishing a series of books. There's Universal Principles of, there's UX, there's interior design. So I'm just looking at my bookshelf. There's architecture. There's various different ones, and they said, "Would you like to write the typography one?" And I said, "I would love to." As long as I can also be the person that designs it, because with typography, I didn't want to be writing about a particular thing. I don't know, maybe you're talking about adding extra tracking to all caps type or something, and have like it be designed where the design would contradict what's in the text. And I've had that in the past with an issue with a website that didn't quite conform to what was said in the text, and it was changed and it was all good, but I didn't want to risk that with a book. And so they were like, yeah, that's fine. I mean, and it was I'm really glad I did that. It was made everything much harder for me because it's just a lot of work to design and illustrate a book, just as much work as to write it, because every time I would go to illustrate something, I'd realize that maybe the text needed a little bit more revision. So it was a massive project, but I was very fortunate that I didn't really have to come up with the core concept, because all of these books, Universal Principles of X, are 100 chapters, and each chapter is just a double page spread with some text on one side and some imagery on the other side. So the kind of general format was there, so I didn't have to come up with that. The real challenging thing, beyond like just writing it, was really editing. It's always editing is much harder and more time consuming than writing, but really close to the end I changed things quite radically. I moved loads of chapters around. I changed the way that the book was divided up into different sections, and they had really big effects about if that part was now here and that was now there, that didn't make sense for that chapter to be here, and there was lots of that, and because I was designing it myself, I had a little bit more flexibility to make those last minute changes, which was fortunate, because if I'd just been providing the text, it would have been a lot harder to then convince the publisher that. worth moving and to get their designer to do it, stuff like that. So that was cool. But that was the real challenge, I think, was just kind of structurally trying to work out how do we go from something that starts very basic, very beginner level, very introductory, and ends with something that is, lots of tech stuff to do with, open type on the web and variable fonts and that side of things, and also somehow include information that's useful to novices, to pros, to web people, to print people, to everyone in between. I wanted it to be a universal book where it would appeal to, you'd be able to pick it up as a beginner and feel welcome. You'd be able to pick it up as a pro who's been doing it for 20, 30 years, doing traditional graphic design, and still feel that you're learning something new. And people have said to me that they do feel that way, which I'm very happy about. Like, it seems that people can get different things from it, which is lovely. And I think, to me, that was the really stressful thing. That was what I found the hardest, was trying to kind of make it for everyone, but also not have it just be this kind of very vague, like surface level kind of thing. So hopefully, based on what some people have told me, it's achieved that. I mean, not everyone's going to feel that way, of course, but that was the big challenge. And hopefully it's kind of succeeded to some degree, at least.
No, I agree with that. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
I'm in the type industry, and trust me, there's things to learn, and there are definitely things that are good for beginners, for people who are longer in the industry. So that's mission accomplished.
Thank you very much.
Where can people get the book? Like, I've seen your website, but tell me,
Yes.
you know better. And
yeah, it's all in all good bookshops, as they say, and some bad ones too. But yeah, the best place is probably if you go to my site, so elliottjaystocks.com/book. I've got a load of links. It's not all the usual places. It's there's some bookshop links there. Bookshop allows you to support indie bookstores near you, so that's always a good one. It's in Amazon, obviously. Amazon usually are the best in price, and they can get it to you quick and all that stuff. But do you want to feed the Amazon beast? It's excusable. I mean, you know what? It's nearly Christmas. If you need a last minute gift and Amazon's the only one that can ship it, totally get it. It's not like I don't use Amazon, but where possible, support your indie bookstore. I'm also selling copies direct as well now, so I still have a big box of books just out of shop that I'm selling direct. Probably not in time for Christmas at this point, but if you want to buy direct from me, there's a big glowing button on the website that you can click as well.
Okay, that's amazing. I will definitely make sure to leave all the links in the comment section and in the podcast as well. And one final thing, after almost hour and a half, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I have asked this question all of the people so far. If there's just one advice you could give to designers, what would that be?
I think I've already used up my answer. the jumping between things. This very succinctly, follow your passion projects. So there's a talk that I've been doing recently, and it's the subject of the talk that I'm doing in Trondheim in Norway in January, which is.
Okay, I told you Instagram doesn't like me. I told you. Okay,
it ended on a cliffhanger.
Yeah,
the subject of the talk is and then black.
Go on.
So for a long time, I was always encouraging people to follow their passion projects. But to be honest, I was saying it with youthful naivety, and I didn't have the data to back it up. But now that I am old, I've been doing this for 20 years, I can say definitively that following my passion projects has led to me getting paid work. So whether that's a literal job, client work, being invited to speak at a conference, whether that's a side project that's come out of that because I've learned stuff. There's so many ways in which these various different side projects have led to another thing, and they compound as well. They build upon each other. It's just doing the podcast has led to other things, but that only came about because of doing the magazine and this kind of thing. So sometimes there's a very literal line you can draw, like hello, we saw this work you did on this magazine. Can you design a magazine for us? You know, and sometimes it's more subtle, and it takes maybe 5 years before you're maybe on someone's radar, and then 5 years from now they're in like a director level role at a company and they want to hire you, and they've been like following your work for a bit, which is lovely and very humbling. And but the all throughout that, it is all about following your passion projects and making things that you, like I said, it's kind of selfishly want to see out there in the world, or to maybe you just want to learn something new. Maybe you're frustrated in your day job and you want a little bit of release to do some kind of wacky design that you wouldn't usually get to do. Maybe it's helping out a charitable organization, a friend, family. And maybe it's just getting some experience in something else that you wouldn't usually get to dabble with. But I think it's so important, and it really does lead to paying work. And I can say that with the gift of hindsight now. So that would be my thing. And we spend most of our waking hours working. So if you can make that into something that you love doing, then that is like you've done it. And if you can't, then use the time that you can to do something you love, and that will help change things, so that you're eventually, hopefully, your day-to-day will be following that thing that you've been doing on the side. And loads of folks speak about this. And Jessica Hirsch has always done a great thing about, procrastinating working, like just doing this stuff on the side, like staying up late to get something done when you maybe should be doing your work. But it's about being driven by what you want to do. And my advice would be to just let that happen as much as you can in your life and your career.
That's amazing answer. Thank you. Well, I first of all want to apologize to your family for taking you over for an hour and a half.
That's okay. That's quite all right. They've been having swimming lessons, so it's a good time.
Okay. No, it was really a pleasure. I mean, I could go on and on now, and there's so many other questions. We should definitely do this again when you publish.
I'd love to. Absolutely. There is another book on the way. So
we'll keep that. Yeah.
It's going to plant the seeds.
We'll definitely see you again here, and it's such a pleasure to talk to you. I told at the beginning, you seem so humble, like a real nice person, and it's
likewise
a real pleasure to have you here today.
It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks, Elliot. And thank you, everyone, guys, who joined in with the questions. I will be later, like in the stories publishing, who was asking questions and who actually got the book. So, one lucky person will get this one. So it's a great thing for today. Thank you, everyone. And thank you. And happy holidays, and see you all soon.
Thanks, everyone. Happy holidays. Bye.
Bye.